Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at data privacy.
A landscape that's constantly changing.
Yeah, and to be honest, it can sometimes feel like a minefield trying to keep up with compliance.
It definitely can.
But don't worry, we're going to break it down, help equip you with what you need.
That's right, because just knowing the basics isn't enough.
Right.
As compliance officers, you need to really understand the regulations,
Yeah.
the ins and outs of data subject rights,
Mm-hmm.
and the practical strategies for, safeguarding your organization's reputation.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. We've got a bunch of sources here, articles, research reports, even some legal analysis.
Right.
All about data privacy. Think of this as your shortcut to becoming a data privacy pro.
Yeah, we'll be talking about some complex topics, like how personal data is defined. It goes
Yeah.
way beyond just, names and addresses. We're
Yep.
talking about IP addresses, biometric data, online browsing habits, even location data.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But before we get too deep in the weeds here, let's make sure we're all on the same page. So what is data privacy?
So at its core, data privacy is about responsible handling of information, personal information.
Okay.
That means protecting it, obviously, but it also means empowering individuals to control their own data.
Right.
Transparency and consent are really important.
Yeah, how many of us actually read those privacy policies before clicking it? I know I don't.
Right, most people don't, and that's where the regulations come in. They provide a framework for responsible data handling
Okay.
and give individuals some rights they can actually enforce.
Yeah.
But navigating this patchwork of laws globally can be challenging.
Especially for companies that operate in multiple regions.
Definitely.
So I'm already seeing the need for some expertise here.
Yeah.
Let's talk regulations. Our sources mention some of the biggest ones globally: GDPR, CCPA, HPP, PIPEDA, and LGPD in Brazil.
Mm.
Seems like every region has their own approach to this.
It really does. Understanding all the nuances of these regulations is critical for compliance.
Okay.
So, for example, while GDPR from the EU is seen as like the gold standard for data protection, CCPA in California focuses on the consumer a lot more.
Okay, interesting. So it's not just about memorizing the rules then. You really have to understand the philosophy behind each regulation.
You do.
Okay. I'm guessing that's where the real compliance issues come up.
Absolutely. Like with GDPR and CCPA, both have a lot of implications for companies working with data from individuals in those areas.
Right.
But they're different in key areas. How they define personal data, what they require for consent, the rights they give individuals.
So as a compliance officer, I need to be aware of these differences and adjust my approach, my strategies accordingly.
You got it. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here.
Definitely not.
And that's why understanding the foundational principles is so important.
Okay, I like that. So beyond the laws, what are the guiding principles? What makes a compliance program really effective?
Well, it all starts with data minimization.
Okay.
You've probably heard that term before. It means only collect the data you really need, for the specific purpose you're collecting it for.
Right.
So think about it this way. If you're doing an internal audit, you wouldn't just pull every single employee record.
Right.
You'd focus on the specific data that you need for that audit.
That makes sense. It's about being deliberate and strategic about the data you're using.
Exactly. Transparency is also important. Individuals have a right to know how their data is being used.
Okay.
And that means going beyond those, cookie-cutter, legalese-filled privacy policies.
Right.
You need to make it clear, use plain language that people can understand.
So it's about building trust with people by being honest about your practices.
Yeah, it's essential. And it ties right into accountability.
Okay.
This isn't just about having policies. It's about actually enforcing them. Okay. You, as a compliance officer, need to make sure there's responsibility within the organization and that everyone's taking data privacy seriously.
So it's about more than just having a data protection officer.
Way more.
It's about creating a whole culture around data privacy.
You got it. It's a company-wide thing. That's why employee training is so important. Everyone who handles data, from marketing to IT, needs to understand their responsibilities.
One of our sources actually mentioned a study that found human error to be a leading cause of data breaches.
Yeah,
It really highlights the importance of training and awareness.
for sure.
But I'm curious about some of the more subtle ways that that employees might unintentionally compromise data privacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it really is something that often gets overlooked. Like, it's not always about malicious intent.
Right.
Sometimes it's just, harmless actions,
Yeah.
like talking about sensitive information in public, using unsecure Wi-Fi, or even leaving a laptop unattended.
I hadn't even thought about some of those. It's a good reminder that data privacy risks can be anywhere.
Anywhere.
But it also makes me think about how important it is to have those policies and procedures in place to guide people.
Absolutely. And those policies need to be reviewed and updated. The threat landscape is always changing.
Right.
And the reality is that no matter how good your security is, there's always a chance of a breach.
That's a bit scary. So let's talk about the what ifs.
Okay.
What if, despite our best efforts, there is a data breach? What are the steps a compliance officer should take to minimize the damage?
That's where a good incident response plan comes in. You need a roadmap, a clear roadmap for dealing with a data breach.
Okay, so walk me through it. What makes an incident response plan effective?
Well, first of all, you have to have a process for identifying and containing the breach quickly.
Okay.
This might involve isolating systems, shutting down services, or even taking the whole network offline for a bit.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's all about damage control.
Right. Contain it, and then you can investigate what happened, how big the incident was, and the root cause.
Okay.
This is how you learn and prevent it from happening again.
It sounds like this investigation could be really complex, though.
It can be. A lot of companies actually bring in outside experts
Okay.
to get an objective assessment, help put the pieces together.
Right.
They can also help with data recovery, evidence, and all the legal reporting.
So you're talking about a whole team of people here. IT experts, lawyers, PR pros.
It really takes a village. You rarely handle a data breach alone.
Okay. So we've contained the breach, investigated, and hopefully learned from it. But what about the people whose data was compromised?
Right. That's a critical part. You have to notify them, tell them about the breach, what data was compromised, the risks they face.
But I imagine those conversations can be hard.
They can be. You have to be understanding, answer their questions honestly, and offer support, like credit monitoring or identity theft protection.
So it's about taking responsibility and showing a genuine commitment to helping people.
Exactly. It's about rebuilding trust and lessening the harm. A data breach isn't just numbers and statistics. It's real people's lives.
That's a good point. And it highlights how human data privacy is. It's not just about the rules and fines.
Right.
It's about people.
Well said. And it's about recognizing that data privacy is a journey, not a destination. Technology is always changing. We need to stay informed, change our approach, and keep data privacy at the forefront.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot, from the basics to incident response. But there's another layer here, isn't there, beyond the legal and technical stuff?
There is. It's about ethics.
Okay, I'm interested to hear more about that. What are some of the things to consider when the rules and ethics don't always line up?
Well, think about purpose limitation.
Okay.
Using data only for the reason it was collected, not for something else entirely, without consent.
I can see how that could be tough. Companies always want to find new ways to use data.
They do. And that's where making ethical choices matters.
Okay.
For example, let's say you're a healthcare provider. You've collected patient data for treatment. Could you use that data to market a weight loss program?
That doesn't seem right. Even if it's legal, it doesn't feel ethical.
Exactly. You have to ask yourself, is this really what's best for the people whose data this is? Are we being transparent? Are we respecting their privacy?
It sounds like we need to change our mindset. It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do.
You got it. It's about seeing the bigger picture, considering the ethical implications of what we do with data.
I'm really glad we're talking about this. Data privacy isn't just a legal or technical issue. It's a human one. And we, as compliance officers, need to be the ones advocating for ethical practices.
I couldn't agree more. We can help shape how data privacy looks in the future by being responsible, promoting transparency, and making sure people's rights are protected.
Well said. We've covered a lot in this first part, from basic principles and regulations to the ethical side of things. But I feel like we're just getting started.
We are. And in the next part, we'll dive deeper into some of the real-world challenges. Talk about some practical strategies for managing all this.
Can't wait. But before we move on, something's been on my mind. We've talked about minimizing data, limiting its use, but companies seem to be collecting more data than ever.
It's true, and it's not slowing down. As technology grows, we're seeing more and more data being collected, from our browsing to to our location tracked by, our phones and watches.
A lot to think about.
Yeah, it really is overwhelming. Raises a lot of questions about how we handle and protect all this data.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those questions then. What are some of the biggest challenges you see companies facing when it comes to data privacy these days?
I think one of the biggest ones is just keeping up with the regulations.
Yeah.
New laws are coming out all the time, and even the old ones are being interpreted and enforced in new ways.
It really is a lot to keep track of.
It is. And it's not just about knowing the law. You have to understand how it affects your organization.
Right.
You have to be able to translate those rules into policies and procedures and figure out how to implement them.
So it's one thing to know the law, but it's another thing to actually to put it into practice.
Exactly. And that means understanding your organization's data, where it's stored, how it's used, who has access to it. And then you have to figure out if your practices are even compliant.
Speaking of that, one of the sources we have actually talks about doing regular data audits. Is that something that you recommend?
Absolutely. Data audits are essential. They give you a clear picture of what you're doing with data. You can answer questions like, what are we collecting? Where is it? How are we using it? Who can see it?
So it's kind of like taking stock of all your data and then checking to make sure everything's secure.
Yeah, exactly. And then you use what you learn from those audits to improve your data privacy plan.
Yeah.
Focus on the areas where you might need to improve.
Makes sense, but it also sounds like a lot of work, especially for big companies that have data everywhere.
Oh, it definitely can be. But there are tools, technologies that can help.
Okay.
Like, there are programs that can scan your systems and find sensitive data.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to do everything manually.
So technology can help simplify some of this.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking about the human element here.
Right.
How do you make sure that your employees are actually following the rules?
You're right. You can have the best security in the world, but if someone just, leaves their laptop open at Starbucks, it's all for nothing.
Exactly.
That's why training and awareness are so important. Everyone in the company needs to understand that they play a role in protecting data.
So it's not enough to just to have a training session when someone starts.
Right.
You need to keep reminding people, keep it fresh in their minds.
Exactly. It has to be part of the culture.
Right.
That means regular communication, more training, maybe even, some interactive exercises.
I like that, the interactive part. I mean, let's be real. Data privacy is not exactly the most thrilling topic.
Yeah, true.
So you have to find ways to make it interesting, make it stick.
Find ways to make it relevant for people.
Right. Okay. So we've talked about audits, training, building a culture of data privacy. What else can we do?
Well, data security itself is crucial.
Okay.
You need technical and organizational measures in place to protect the data.
So we're talking about the real nuts and bolts stuff.
Yeah.
Like encryption, firewalls, all that.
Yeah, all that. But also things like password policies, data retention policies, and having a plan for when things go wrong.
Right, because like we said, even if you have the best tech, people can still make mistakes.
Absolutely. That's why you need to have different layers of security. It's not just about technology. It's about people, processes, all working together. One of our sources actually talked about this idea of privacy by design. Have you heard of that?
I have, but remind me. What does that mean again?
So it's the idea that you should build privacy into your products and services from the very beginning.
Okay.
I don't want to try to add it on as an afterthought.
So you're thinking about privacy from the very start when you're designing something new.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, if you design things with privacy in mind, you're probably not going to collect as much unnecessary data in the first place.
Exactly. And that can really lower your risk.
Right. Okay. So we've talked a lot about preventing problems, but I want to come back to incident response.
Okay.
We have to be prepared for those what-if moments.
We do. You can do everything right and still have a data breach. That's why an incident response plan is so important.
All right, so let's break it down. What needs to be in that plan?
Okay, so first you need to know who's doing what, who's in charge of finding potential problems and reporting them.
Okay. Who makes the decisions about fixing things? Who's going to talk to the people affected and the regulators?
So everyone knows their role, knows who's calling the shots.
Exactly. And all of that needs to be written down so everyone has access to it.
Okay, so let's say we've found a potential problem. What happens then?
Then you need to contain it. Stop it from spreading. That might mean shutting down systems, disconnecting from the internet, maybe even taking the whole network offline.
Wow. Okay, so really drastic measures.
Sometimes, yeah. But it's all about stopping things from getting worse.
Right.
You have to make a judgment call based on what's happening.
And that's where the plan comes in. So you don't have to make those decisions on the spot.
Right. You have a plan and you practice it so
Right.
everyone knows what to do.
So we've contained it. What's next?
Investigation. You need to figure out exactly what happened, how it happened, and what data was affected. That might involve, looking at your systems, talking to employees, going through logs.
It's like detective work, trying to figure out the whole story.
It is. And you need that information to fix things and to prevent it from happening again.
Okay, but what if we find out that really important data was compromised? What do we do then?
Then you have to tell people. Let them know what happened. It's not just the law, it's the right thing to do.
And these conversations, they must be so difficult.
They are. But you have to be honest, clear about what happened, and explain the risks. And you have to do it quickly.
So transparency is really important.
It is. And being empathetic, you have to acknowledge that this is serious, take responsibility, and offer support.
It's about rebuilding trust.
Right. And remembering that this isn't just about the company, it's about the people whose data was exposed.
Okay, so we've talked about containing the breach, investigating it, and letting people know. But what about the long-term effects of a data breach?
Well, there can be a lot of consequences. Financial losses, damage to your reputation, legal problems, maybe even fines from regulators.
So it's not just about fixing the immediate problem.
No.
There's a lot of fallout to deal with.
Right. And that's another reason why having a good plan is so important. It's not just about reacting. It's about being prepared.
And learning from what happened.
Exactly. You look at what went wrong, see where you can improve, and make changes to prevent it from happening again.
You know, this whole conversation has really highlighted something for me. Data privacy, it's not just about the technology.
Right.
It's about people.
Absolutely. It's about trust and people's rights. And I think that's something that all compliance officers need to remember.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the rules and regulations.
It is.
But at the end of the day, it's about real people's lives.
Well said. It's a big responsibility. And I think it's something that should make us all want to be the best we can be at our jobs.
Yeah, protecting people's privacy is important.
It really is.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the practical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another layer, isn't there? The ethical side.
You're right, there is. And that's where things can get really complicated. Because sometimes there's no easy answer in the law. You have to rely on your own sense of right and wrong.
So where do we see these ethical dilemmas? Where do the rules and our ethics clash?
Well, one area is artificial intelligence, especially when it's used to analyze data.
Cool.
AI is getting really good at finding patterns in data, but that can be a problem for privacy.
We've talked about AI bias a little bit already, but how does this play out in data analytics?
Well, imagine an insurance company using AI to look at customer data and decide who's a high risk.
Okay.
The AI might find connections that humans wouldn't see, and that could lead to some unfair decisions.
Like discriminated against certain groups of people.
Right. Even if the AI itself isn't biased, the data it learns from could be.
Because the data reflects the biases that already exist in the world.
Exactly. And then there's the question of transparency. How do you make sure that people understand how these AI systems are making decisions about them? How do you explain it to them?
It's like that black box problem we talked about.
It is. We need to understand how these algorithms work, what's influencing them.
And I imagine that's going to require a lot of different things working together. Technical solutions, rules, and ethics.
It will.
So we've got the metaverse, we've got AI data analytics. Anything else on the horizon that we should be aware of?
Data localization is something to keep an eye on.
Okay.
The idea that data should only be stored in the country where it was collected.
I've heard about that. What's driving that?
Lots of things. Concerns about national security, data sovereignty, even economic protectionism. Some countries are making laws that require local data storage.
And that could be a big challenge for companies that work in multiple countries.
It definitely can.
It sounds like the future of data privacy is going to be a constant balancing act.
I think you're right. It's about trying to balance different needs, different interests, and keeping up with the technology as it changes.
It sounds like a lot to handle.
It is, but it's an exciting time to be working in this field. We have a chance to shape how data privacy evolves.
Yeah.
Make sure it respects people's rights and promotes innovation.
I like that. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot about what's coming next for data privacy.
Me too.
But before we move on, I'm curious, We've talked a lot about building a culture of data privacy within companies.
Right.
But what about individual responsibility? What can people do to protect their own data?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something everyone should be thinking about. There are a lot of simple things you can do to protect your privacy.
Okay, well, let's hear them. What are some of those things? What can our listeners do?
Well, the first thing is to be aware. Know what information you're sharing, who you're sharing it with, and how they're using it. Read those privacy policies.
Yeah.
I know they're boring, but they tell you what's happening with your data.
And pay attention to the permissions you're giving to apps and websites.
Exactly. Don't just click agree without thinking
Yeah.
about it. And think about what you're posting on social media.
Yeah.
Once it's out there, it's hard to control.
Good point. So be careful about what you share and who you share it with. What about passwords? I know those are a weak spot for a lot of people.
Passwords are so important. You need a strong, unique password for every single account. Don't use the same one for everything. And a password manager can help you create and store those passwords safely.
Okay, so strong passwords, password manager. Got it. What else?
Be careful about phishing scams. You know, those emails or texts that try to trick you.
Yeah.
Don't click on links you don't recognize, and don't give out personal information unless you're sure it's legitimate.
It's all about being careful and not trusting everything you see online.
Right. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Okay. What about our devices? Phones, laptops, all that. They hold a lot of our personal information.
Yeah, you need to protect those too. Make sure they're locked with a strong password or biometric lock. Keep your software up to date and think about using encryption to protect the data on your devices.
So physical security and digital security.
Exactly. And be careful about public Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Don't use it for anything sensitive like banking or shopping. Those networks can be really insecure.
So if you're out and about, it's better to use your mobile data or a VPN.
Yeah, a VPN's a good idea. It encrypts your connection and makes it harder for someone to snoop on your data.
Okay, so passwords, phishing, device security, public Wi-Fi, anything else.
Yeah. The last thing is to check your privacy settings. On social media, on any online accounts you have. Make sure you know what you're sharing and who can see it.
So it's about taking control, making sure you're comfortable with what's happening with your data.
Exactly. Data privacy is a constant thing. You have to stay aware, and you have to be willing to do something to protect yourself.
This has been really insightful. We've talked about so much, the basics of data privacy, all those complicated regulations, even ethics and AI bias. But I feel like there's one more thing we should talk about. The future of data privacy.
Yeah, you're right. Things are changing so fast, and technology just keeps evolving. It feels like every day there's a new challenge, a new opportunity. When it comes to protecting data, it's hard to keep up.
So looking ahead, what are some of the things you see coming down the pipeline? What trends or technologies are going to shape data privacy?
Well, one thing that's getting a lot of attention is the metaverse.
Yeah.
This whole idea of a digital world, it's creating a whole new set of data privacy questions.
I've heard a lot about the metaverse, but I'll be honest, I don't really get it. What does it even mean for data privacy?
Well, think about it. In the metaverse, companies can track everything you do, your movements, your interactions, even your emotional reactions.
Wow, okay.
They can collect data on your preferences, your habits, who you talk to. It's a lot of information.
It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
So how do we even approach data privacy in the metaverse?
That's a tough question. And honestly, I don't think anyone has all the answers yet, but we need to start thinking about it now.
Okay, so what are some of the things to consider?
Well, for one, we need to rethink how we get consent. How do you get meaningful consent in a virtual world?
Right, because it's not like clicking a box on a website.
No, it's not. And then there's security. How do you protect data in a world that's so interconnected?
The security risks seem a lot bigger in that kind of environment.
They are. And then there's the question of ownership. Who owns the data in the metaverse?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Is it the users? The companies that run the platforms? It's not clear.
It's not. And it's going to take a lot of work to figure out how to protect people's rights in this new world.
Okay, so the metaverse is definitely something to watch. What else? What other trends should we be paying attention to?
Well, AI is another big one, especially how it's being used to analyze data.
Okay, yeah. We talked about AI bias before, but it seems like data analytics adds another layer to that.
It does. Like, think about an insurance company using AI to predict health risks and set prices.
Okay.
The AI might find patterns that humans wouldn't, and that could lead to discrimination.
So even if the AI is fair, the data it's using might not be.
Right. And then there's the transparency problem again.
Yeah.
How do we make sure people understand how these AI systems are making decisions about them?
We have to be able to see how they work.
We do. And that's going to require a lot of different solutions, technical, regulatory, and ethical.
So the metaverse, AI data analytics, anything else?
One more thing. Data localization is becoming a bigger issue. The idea that data should be kept in the country where it was collected.
I've been hearing more about that. Why is that becoming such a big deal?
There are a lot of reasons. National security, data sovereignty, and even just protecting local economies. Some countries are even passing laws about it.
Wow.
That's going to make things tough for companies that operate globally.
Yeah. Sounds like it. So the future of data privacy is going to be a lot about trying to find the right balance.
It is. But I think it's also, an exciting time to be in this field. We have the chance to really shape how this all plays out.
Yeah, we can make sure that it protects people and promotes innovation.
Exactly.
This has been great. Really eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better grasp on the challenges and the possibilities for the future of data privacy.
I'm glad to hear that. And I hope our listeners feel the same way. I hope they feel inspired to be part of this conversation.
Me too. We've covered a lot today. And it's clear that data privacy is a constantly moving target. It's up to all of us to stay informed, to be part of the discussion, and to advocate for responsible data practices.
Absolutely. Data privacy isn't just about following the rules. It's a basic human right, and we all need to stand up for it.
That's a great point. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us for this deep dive into data privacy. We hope you found it helpful and informative.
Yes, thank you for listening. We hope you'll continue to explore these topics and be a part of shaping a future where data privacy is a priority for everyone.
Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.